The phone call ended, and my mother's voice was still ringing in my ears, cold and final. "You have brought shame on this family. You are no longer our daughter." I just stood there, phone still in my hand, and the silence in my apartment was absolutely deafening. Only an hour before, I'd told them I wouldn't go through with the arranged marriage. I chose my freedom. I just didn't realize it would cost me everything. The world I knew, this life held together by the tight-knit threads of family and tradition, had just been completely torn apart. And as I stood there, on the edge of a life I never asked for, I had to wonder, what does honor even mean if it costs you your soul? Before that phone call, my life was predictable, comfortable, even. I was the good daughter, the one who never made a fuss. My family was like this small, proud island in the huge city we called home. My parents had emigrated with practically nothing but the clothes on their backs and this fierce drive to preserve our culture. They built a life for us, brick by brick, and the thing that held it all together was tradition. Family gatherings were loud, vibrant, and always filled with the smell of my mom's cooking, the sound of my dad telling the same old stories, and the weight of 1,000 unspoken expectations. I loved my family, I really did. But their love often felt conditional. Like it was tied to a version of me that was obedient and quiet. It was a life lived in a box. Finish university, get a good job, and then, the final and most important step, marry a man they chose. A man from a good family, with the right background, who would cement our family's place in the community. Love was secondary, a nice to have. The real goal was honor, tradition, and social standing. To them, a good marriage wasn't about finding a soulmate, it was about doing your duty. I understood their logic, I did, but I could never shut down that little voice inside me that kept whispering, "But what about what you want?" This constant tug-of-war between my duty and my own desires left me with this low-grade hum of anxiety all the time. I was living two lives, the perfect daughter on the outside, and on the inside, a woman who just wanted to be free. I was 24 when the conversation finally happened. And it wasn't a question, it was an announcement. We were in the living room after dinner, the TV humming in the background. My dad cleared his throat, the official sound for "this is serious," and he and my mom exchanged a look. Then he turned to me, his face all proud and determined. "We have found a wonderful boy for you," he said, like he was giving me a present. "You remember the Shah family? Their son, Naveen. He's a successful engineer. A very respectable family." My mom jumped in, her eyes shining. "This is a great honor for us, Anjali. The Shahs are very well regarded. This will bring so much security to our family." They were talking about this marriage like it was a business deal that had already been signed. They talked about his job, his family's money, his parents' reputation. They never once talked about him. They didn't know his favorite color, or his dreams, or what made him laugh. And they didn't seem to think I needed to know either. I just felt completely powerless. My entire future was being mapped out for me, and I didn't even get to hold the pen. I felt so trapped. My heart was pounding. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Baba, Mama, I appreciate you thinking of me. But I don't know him. I can't marry a stranger." The smiles just slid right off their faces. My mother's expression went hard, and my father's brow furrowed. "What is there to know?" he asked, and he was genuinely confused. "We know his family. That is what matters. This is how it is done." They didn't see me asking for a voice in my own life, they saw a strange, foolish rebellion. The problem wasn't just their proposal, it was my quiet, terrified but definite no. And in that moment, the first crack appeared in the foundation of my world. The days after my refusal were thick with a tension you could slice with a knife. My parents' shock quickly turned into a full-blown campaign of emotional manipulation. The first tactic was concern. "We only want what's best for you," my mom would say, her voice all soft and pleading. "You're young, you don't understand the world. This is for your security." My dad tried a different angle, appealing to duty. "This isn't just about you, Anjali. It's about our family, our name. A daughter's obedience shows her father's honor. Are you trying to make me look like a fool?" Every conversation was a guilt trip, designed to make me doubt myself. They painted this bleak picture of my future if I didn't listen, lonely, struggling, and full of regret. My own dreams were dismissed as childish fantasies, a side effect of being too westernized. They used that phrase like a weapon, to make me feel like I was betraying my heritage. They were framing my desire for choice as a rejection of them, of our entire culture. The pressure was constant and crushing. I could feel my own identity slipping away, being replaced by the labels they were sticking on me: selfish, ungrateful, difficult. Not having control over my own life was suffocating. They weren't just trying to control my future, they were trying to control my mind, to convince me my own feelings were wrong. It was just this relentless emotional battle inside my own head. Was I betraying my family by wanting to be happy? Or was I betraying myself by even thinking about giving in? About a month into this, things escalated. They called a family meeting. My aunts and uncles, people who'd bounced me on their knee, were all there, sitting in our living room with these grim, judgmental faces. It felt less like a family gathering and more like an intervention. I was the defendant on trial. My uncle, my dad's older brother, spoke first. His voice was deep and commanding. "Anjali," he started, "your parents are worried. We're all worried. You are throwing away a golden opportunity. But more than that, you're putting our family's honor at risk." Then, one by one, they all chimed in. My aunt told me I was selfish and breaking my mother's heart. My other uncle warned me that no other decent family would look at me if word got out. It was just a barrage of accusations, each one meant to wear me down. They talked about me like I wasn't even in the room, picking apart my personality and complaining about Western individualism. It was a full-on generational and cultural clash. To them, I was a broken part of the family machine that needed to be forced back into place. To me, I was a person screaming to be heard. I tried to explain. I really did. I talked about love and partnership, about wanting to choose my own person. I told them it wasn't about disrespecting them, it was about respecting myself. The look on their faces was this mix of pity and contempt. "Love comes after marriage," my aunt said, waving her hand dismissively. "You watch too many movies." The feeling of isolation was absolute. I was in a room full of my family, and I had never felt more alone. They couldn't understand me, and they didn't want to. They just wanted me to give up my own identity for the good of the family. The stress was almost unbearable. I left that meeting feeling completely hollowed out, realizing with this dawning horror that their love was conditional. Their honor was more important than my happiness. After the failed meeting, the atmosphere at home turned arctic. The warm home I knew was gone, replaced by a cold, heavy silence. My parents only spoke to me when they absolutely had to, their words short and sharp. We ate our meals without a word. My very presence felt like an intrusion. They were freezing me out, hoping that if they starved me of any affection, I'd break. The isolation went beyond our front door. My phone, which was usually buzzing with texts from cousins, went silent. I was being socially excommunicated, a ghost in my own community. At a community event, people I'd known my whole life would just give me a stiff nod and turn away, their whispers following me like a shadow. The social fallout my family warned me about was happening. I was being branded as the disobedient one, the one who brought shame. I felt myself sinking into a really dark place. I was so trapped and desperate. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I turned to the only place I could think of. My hands were shaking, but I typed my situation into a search bar: refused an arranged marriage, family disowned me. And then I found it. A Reddit forum. A thread filled with stories from people just like me. Men and women from all over the world, sharing how they fought for their own lives against the weight of tradition. Reading their stories was like finding a lighthouse in a storm. They wrote about the same pain, the same isolation, the same manipulation. They talked about the guilt and the grief. But they also talked about what came after: the freedom, the peace, the self-discovery. They talked about being resilient. For the first time in months, I didn't feel so alone. These strangers on the internet gave me a little piece of hope. They were proof that you could survive this, that you could build a life on the other side. Their courage gave me a kind of blueprint. And in those lonely, late-night hours, with just the glow of my phone screen, my desperation started turning into a quiet, steely resolve. The turning point came on a grey Tuesday afternoon. I'd spent weeks secretly planning my escape. I found a small apartment, packed a couple of bags, and had a friend on standby to help me move. The last step was the hardest, telling my parents. I couldn't just disappear. As much as they'd hurt me, I owed them one last conversation. I sat them down in the same living room where it all started. This time, I wasn't there to discuss. I told them I loved them, but I would not marry Naveen. I told them I was moving out. I wasn't asking for permission, I was telling them my decision. The reaction was volcanic. My mother started crying, but not tears of sadness. It was rage. How could you do this to us? After everything we have done for you? We gave you everything, she screamed. My father's face was a mask of cold fury. He stood up, trembling. You are selfish, he spat, and the word hit me like a punch. You care for no one but yourself. You talk of this happiness, this Western nonsense. What is happiness? Is it more important than your family? Your honor? He accused me of throwing their sacrifices back in their faces, of choosing a life of shame for all of us. That's when I finally broke. My happiness is not nonsense. I screamed, my voice cracking with months of pain. My life is not a transaction. It's not something you can use to build your reputation. I am your daughter, not a pawn. My father looked at me like I was a total stranger. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. If you walk out that door, he said, you are no longer our daughter. You will be dead to us. You will have chosen your path. The marriage or nothing. Tears were streaming down my face. I looked at my mother, just hoping for a flicker of the mom who used to read me bedtime stories. I saw nothing but a stone wall. The choice was clear. It was the most painful decision of my life, but I chose me. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked out the door without looking back. An hour later, my phone rang. It was my mother. I answered, a stupid little flicker of hope in my heart. That's when she delivered the final line, you have brought shame on this family. You are no longer our daughter. Click. The line went dead, and so did the life I had known. Those first few weeks were a total blur of grief and terror. The silence in my tiny apartment was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Every morning, I'd wake up with this phantom limb feeling, reaching for a family that wasn't there. I'd scroll through my contacts, my thumb hovering over Mama and Baba, my heart just aching because I knew there was no point in calling. I was mourning people who were still alive. The practical side of being alone was just as hard. Suddenly I had to figure out bills and laundry, and how to cook for just one person. All the things that were just part of the family ecosystem before. I had a job, thank God, so I was okay financially, but I was emotionally bankrupt. Some nights, I'd just sit on my floor and cry, completely overwhelmed by it all. My parents' warnings about a lonely, miserable life played on a loop in my head, and I had to fight them every single day. But underneath all the grief, there was this other feeling, one I didn't recognize at first, a quiet, fragile sense of relief. For the first time in my life, there was no one I had to please. No expectations to meet. No script to follow. My time was my own. My choices were my own. My life was finally in my hands. The fear was completely crippling. But the freedom? It was intoxicating. It was this terrifying, amazing paradox. I had lost my family, but I had found myself. And now, I had to figure out what to do with her. Building a new life was slow. It started with small things. I painted a wall in my apartment a bright, defiant yellow, a color my mother would have hated. I started taking a weekend pottery class I'd always wanted to try. Getting my hands dirty with clay, shaping something that was entirely mine. It was therapy. I realized that for my whole life, my identity was just daughter, or sister, or a member of the community. Without those labels, I felt like a blank canvas. It forced me to actually look inward and ask the hard questions. What did I believe in? What were my values, separate from the ones I grew up with? Who was Anjali when nobody was watching? I started going to therapy. That was a huge step, because in my family, mental health was taboo, a sign of weakness. But talking to someone neutral was life-changing. It helped me unpack all the emotional conditioning and grieve my family in a healthy way. It gave me the tools to understand that their actions came from their own cultural programming and their own fears. Not from a lack of love, even if that love was expressed in a way that hurt me. I also started building a new family, a chosen one. Friends who stuck by me became my lifeline. I made new friends in my pottery class who just knew me as Anjali, not as someone's daughter. They celebrated my small wins and sat with me when I was sad. They showed me that love doesn't have to be conditional. It can be based on respect and real affection. I was slowly, carefully, redefining not just who I was, but what family even meant. It's been a year and a half now, and my life looks nothing like the disaster my parents predicted. I live in a city I love, in my sunny yellow apartment that's filled with my lopsided pottery and plants that are actually alive. I got promoted at work. I travel. I have a circle of friends who are my true family. I'm even seeing someone, a kind, funny man I chose, who loves me for me, not for my family name. My life isn't perfect. There are still times, especially around the holidays, when this sharp pang of grief just hits me out of nowhere. I miss my mom's cooking. I miss my dad's booming laugh. I actually saw my aunt in a grocery store a few months ago. Our eyes met, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Maybe regret? Sadness? Then she just turned her cart and hurried down another aisle. That's the only contact I've had. But the crushing weight of their expectations is gone. And in its place is a peace I have never known. I've found my own honor. It isn't about obedience or duty. My honor is about my integrity. It's about being resilient. It's about being brave enough to live a real life, even when it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. They said I was bringing shame on the family. But I learned that the real shame is living a life that isn't yours. I chose freedom, and in doing that, I found a happiness deeper than any arranged marriage ever could have given me. I found myself. That was my story, but I know I'm not the only one who has faced this kind of impossible choice. The struggle between family expectations and your own freedom is something a lot of people go through. If this story connected with you, or if you saw a piece of your own journey in it, please like this video and think about subscribing for more stories about navigating life. I really want this to be a safe place for conversation, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments, what does the word honor mean to you? And how do you find the balance between tradition and your own happiness? In the end, this journey wasn't about rejecting my culture. It was about redefining my place in it. It was about taking the values I was taught, like strength and integrity, and using them in a way that was true to me. It's just a reminder that you get to be the author of your own life story. You have the right to choose your own path, define your own happiness, and live a life that feels like your own. It takes an incredible amount of courage, but the peace you find on the other side is worth everything. Thank you for listening.